My name is NikiAnne, and I'm here with a friend and community member and colleague, Rachel. It's a delight to be here. We kind of launched this series through a conversation that Rachel and I were having, and we're like, what if we had this conversation with others and in front of others? Because we know others are thinking about this too. And so we're just going to see where it goes. And this is the first conversation of five under that title of interdependence, and this one's around belonging. I would love to invite you, Rachel, to start off with that reading of Clarissa's, if you're willing.
So this is Dear Brave Souls by Clarissa Pinkola Estes, from The Dangerous Old Woman. You might be familiar with that book. Dear brave souls, welcome to the fireside of our belonging and remembering ourselves home, especially you who belong to the tribe of the Sacred Heart, whose members are filled with red blood, silver tears, souls who sometimes fall backward into blackness and sometimes leap or take small steps towards open and blue sky. Souls who sometimes walk through a gray mist just like a golden sunrise, who take another chance to strive, listen, seek, learn, to live even more deeply than before, thus creating anew again and again. Some of us in that tribe are Scar Clan. This means that at least once in a lifetime, perhaps even more than once, you lived through a great something, a wilderness, famine, a war over your soul, a laceration, a severance, and you are still standing, still striving to walk your head held up and your heart true and your soul beacons flashing to not only show you the way forward, but also by living as deep as possible to show others the way, those who came behind us. So welcome, dear brave souls, to the tribe of the Sacred Heart. Many of us, Scar Clan. Mm.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, it can get me going already. Whew.
I
So
know, it was
good.
hard to read. I was getting a little choked up, and I definitely was feeling a little goosebumpy as I was reading.
Yeah,
Good
for
one.
me, it just is like going to the heart of the matter of this broken connection with our belonging that
Yeah.
feels like this rite of passage with our incarnation, like our for those who believe that a soul incarnates into flesh, and
Mhm.
then that um, this severance happens. This, I don't know, injury, betrayal, unintentional that just comes through that like then has all these ways and faces and pathways of unbelonging that we live out. And I think the question for me, like that comes up is like so but we're talking about belonging, but like what is belonging? And like I know this is a question you've sat with for I imagine your life, Rachel, but just curious, like taking the it out of the abstract and
Mhm.
into the realness of our existence. Like
Mhm.
what comes up for you when people talk about
Mm.
belonging? Like what is it that we're even talking about?
Yeah, I may have shared this with you before, but there was this turning point for me that wasn't very long ago around thinking about belonging that really did take it out of the abstract and ground it in my life. And that was that phrase that I came upon of that I think you shared with me, that belonging yourself to something else. And there was a huge, or you're belonging yourself to, there was a huge kind of like light bulb that went off for me in that moment. That was like, oh, like this is, I'm empowered around this. Like where belonging stops being sort of like an abstract of a sort of like validation or being taken in and accepted and loved by others and became something that like I stepped into. Um, and a word that comes up for me around it is commitment, right? I'm belonging myself to the things that I love and that I am committed to. And like through those actions, like I am like living out my longings. Yeah, I don't want to go too far into it in this moment. Um, but yeah, belonging and commitment are really related in my mind. And so that's what comes up to me. Like, where do I belong? Well, what are the things that I am tending with my life? Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's where I am housed. That's where I belong, you know? And then those different layers of like belonging to place and belonging to people, community, and then also like self, right? Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, in that I'm hearing relationships is at the heart of it.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. For me, I mean, yeah. What's on top for you with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. A couple days ago, I actually Googled and did an internet search on just said the word belonging to see what I had never done that. And
Interesting.
it was all workplace. It was all DEI. It was all
Oh.
diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I was like, whoa, I did not expect that. But then after I sat with it, I was like, oh yeah, this is the framework
Mhm.
that we are, this is the paradigm that's being perpetuated, um, that's reinforcing this disempowering relationship with belonging. Because it's, I mean, I didn't read the content, I didn't go into the links, I didn't, I'm sure there's lots of good stuff in on those sites that I saw. And it seemed like it was, yeah, again, reinforcing that disempowered relationship of someone else has the power
Mhm.
to tell me I belong,
Yep.
how and when, and
Mhm. Mhm.
I'm seeking that acceptance and that approval.
Mhm.
And I think that's with that pattern level conditioning that I imagine most of us inherited
Yeah.
without having examined it and it being examined, from the inside. It's We're just going to keep perpetuating it. And so
Mhm.
here, to bring it
Mhm.
into the village context, like am I have the privilege, I have the honor and delight of interfacing with most visitors that come through.
Mhm.
So whether that's a virtual tour or an in-person tour or hosting an in-person program, and visitors, people checking out Earthaven, people learning, wanting to come for a specific skill set through a course we're doing. Um, the thing that kept showing up was this seeking that was coming to an intentional community with the implicit and sometimes explicit question, is this my place? Do I belong here? Will you
Mhm.
accept me? Do I fit in?
Mhm.
And it was, Earthaven has a boundary of 330 acres and only so many home sites and a long, cumbersome membership process that's a courtship and a vetting process. And so there's no way that everyone that wants to live here can live here. So it was already, it revealed this setup for additional harm and heartbreak to be
Mhm.
perpetuated because all of these longings, these universal basic human needs to be loved, to find home, to be at home, to have community, to belong, or being put into this basket that, um, was a false. It was a setup. It was a false. Um, yeah, an inverse relationship. And so when people, that there's this children's book called, "Are You My Mother?"
Mhm.
that a lot of families and children know. And it felt like, this animal going through being like, are you my mother? Are you my mother? And, this orphan one really trying to find family and origin. And it
Mhm.
felt like that's what we are doing coming to community oftentimes. Like, are you my
Mhm.
people? Are you my place? And
Mhm.
this shopping around, was happening. And so from that, I was like, okay, well, how can somehow we do an interrupter to repattern into a direction where
Mhm.
it's not Earthaven being the judge or and the parent who's in this power dynamic, and this like this little one, this one
Mhm.
who's birthed into flesh, being like, do I belong here? The visitor, the seeking member, reinforcing and replaying out that relationship. And so
Mhm.
it was that like realization for me that I was like, okay, how can we really work with in ourselves who those who already live here, as well as those seeking community, come from that place of, yeah, what do I belong myself to? What do I commit
Yeah.
to? What am I longing for that I
Mhm.
have the power to connect with and
Mhm.
shape the course of my life through? And so
Mhm.
that's where this byline for the Remembering Retreat came up, of cultivating home and community from the inside out,
Mhm.
which I can speak to that program more later, but
Yeah, well, that makes me think about one of the things that I've been saying lately is that belonging is an inside job. That cultural conditioning makes us think that it's an outside, that it is like the validation and acceptance. And like, yeah, it's belonging is an inside job.
it's an inside job that exists inherently in the relationship of in the web of relations.
Oh yeah, with in
Like,
all things. Yeah.
yeah, well, I mean, I say that because I think when people have been wounded by people,
Mhm.
I see some of us attempting to walk through the world in isolation, in protection of more
Mhm.
wounding. And so
Mhm.
this attempt to address a relational issue alone,
Outside of relationship.
yeah, outside of a relationship,
Mhm.
just isn't
Yeah.
effective or
Well,
productive.
that's another cultural conditioning, right? And I think that's a cultural conditioning of maybe like the self-help culture, of that phrase that like, you can't love anyone else until you love yourself, or maybe it's like you can't other people can't love you until you love yourself. And I'm like, what kind of bullshit is that? Like, how I have learned to love myself through other people loving me, right? And like, without that healing and without that relationship, if I thought that I had to sit over here in the corner and do all of that work alone, like, where would I be with that? Like, the healing and the growth, like, yeah, comes with the interfacing with others.
Mhm.
Totally.
And I love that, people, that question was asked in the chat, and hopefully everyone saw that. This question of, what is one committed to? What are each of you committed to? What is each of us committed to, and that we love? And so those answers are those signposts, those clues to
Mhm.
our belonging, to those things that we belong to. So I just want to
Mhm.
like reflect that back through
Mhm.
that relationship of those things that people were sharing. And from what I could see in the chat on this small little screen on the side, um, the things that I remember seeing were, yeah, family, place, characteristics, activities that we engage in, our gifts, relationship to the holy, I saw.
Mm, mhm.
So I just, yeah,
Yeah,
it brings
ideals.
it into that question of like, what are those things we could belong to? And even that, I like that in this book, Belonging by Toko Pa Turner, which we can share that resource with you in a follow-up email. Um, it, Toko Pa really, for me, expanded the scope of belonging out beyond self and beyond human relations into all those things, yeah, our characteristics, our gifts, place,
Mhm,
lineage,
mhm,
um, our wounds. My wounds belong to me.
mm,
Like, they're sacred teachings. And it's something that belongs to me in this territorial way, but to open that up a little differently is this belongs to.
Yeah, the parts of ourselves that we disown and that
Yeah.
we exile. Yeah, that's a really powerful phrase. Like to speak to ourselves and to speak to our tender parts. Yeah, that this belongs to. Hmm.
Yeah, I love, Jack saying, I have a friend that likes to say, I can love myself, but I can't rub my own back.
Right.
Yeah,
Indeed.
like need. Yeah, there's something here that I feel like we've gotten into, and I just want to explicitly name that's been a teaching for me is this relationship of belonging, it being a verb versus a noun.
Hmm.
For me, that's been really creating accessibility to my own power of pathways through. And so the word belong, I love that word. It's appropriate. And the use that I don't hear in mainstream culture as much is the belonging, the act of belonging oneself. And so you referenced that
Hmm.
um, some, and I just wanted to explicitly name like that's the linguistic difference that we can use as a handle to move us from that disempowered place to the empowered place is using it as the verb.
Yeah, I mean, when we speak it, it like feels different in our bodies, right? Like that thought pattern feels, at least it did for me. I like it's a profound shift from being like passive and helpless and receptive into like agency. Yeah, and like following, like it also follows delight, it follows joy, it follows what moves us, and it also like it connects, I think it connects those tendrils to the wounds, right? It starts connecting the wounds with the joys and the delights in some way that I'm having a hard time articulating right now, but I always believe in that, um like wounds and gifts, like they have like, like a placenta between them, like they grow out of the same space,
Mhm.
and that they're always connected. Yeah, and I think about that with the act of belonging, and how profound the shift has been for me. Like, one of maybe the biggest changes, so many changes in my life of being at Earthaven, but this is the longest I have ever lived anywhere in my entire 44 years. And I have only been here for 8 years. And I say only 8 years because it feels to me, from the perspective I hold now, like such a short time. Um, but it is many years longer than I have ever stayed in one place. And like just through that one act, and it was intentional. Like I didn't come here to sort of experiment and like, is this community for me? Or, I was like, I'm going to try this community thing, but I made a commitment to myself that like, if it gets hard, if it gets challenging, when I want to run away to cope with that and go somewhere clean and new and fresh, I'm going to stay and I'm going to see what happens when I stay. And so without even having the language for it, I think I did at some point really early on, like belong myself here. um, yeah, just out of a desire to like, yeah, to grow, to have roots. I had recognized a pattern in myself, that was always wanting something new and fresh when things got really difficult. But things always got really difficult because I was there wherever I was. And I was running into the same relational tangles. And so I belonged myself to place first, I think. Um, and then, like you were talking about humans, like walking through the world with our woundings, and like we all do, and that these wounds come from relationship, right? And so, if the wound comes from relationship, then the wound has to be healed in relationship. And that has been like the 8 year kind of road that I've been walking here, is also always having an intentional eye on that aspect of life here, because the opportunities for healing are abundant. And I say that in the way that like the opportunities for interpersonal challenge or just challenge with yourself in general around different things in community is abundant. And it's important, I think, to always, yeah, hold that framework of like, oh, this is a growth opportunity, this is a commitment opportunity, it's a belonging opportunity, it's an intimacy opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm yeah, want to stick with this piece around that's connected to Earthaven for me too.
Mhm.
I, I commend you for like committing before you even kind of knew what you're getting into, just for like the experiment of growth
Uh-huh.
for you,
Yeah.
of interrupting a pattern. Um, it reminds me of, so yeah, I came to Earthaven 17 years ago for the first time in a work exchange. And I was here for 3 months. Um, I had planned to leave already. I had my plans onward. I wasn't like trying it here for residency other than just this 3 month thing. So that wasn't ever like, is this my place? That wasn't the orientation I had to being here. It was like
Mhm.
wanting to learn skills. And this was 2007. It was a really hard time for the community. There was a lot of philosophical um, standoff of like environmental fundamentalists, like around agriculture mostly. But what happened in my understanding of those times was um, it was very hard and it was pushing people to really, yeah, figure out if they were staying or leaving based on their principles and how much it was a fit
Mm.
here. And I remember I was in my late 20s at the time saying, oh, well, this is fascinating, but I'm going to go find some place who does it better. And what I didn't realize at the time was that was a juvenile naivete of what um, of what was going on here on levels that were so deep I couldn't see because I didn't have the long-term relationship with the vision, with the place, with the
Mhm.
people. And
Mhm.
so um, I ended up leaving, whatever, going, finding other people and places and things to do. And I kept realizing that I was referencing Earthaven all the time. And long story short, I ended up coming back for a visit, striking it up with someone who's now my husband, um, 14 years ago, and getting back into residential deep relationship with Earthaven and Earthaveners and moving back here 12 years ago. But in that period where I hadn't moved back here yet, but I was dating someone who was a member here, I realized that there was no way to compare what was going on elsewhere with a place for me that I didn't know any other place that was doing such a pressure cooker of an experience, of an experiment, which was living on land together, co-owning together,
Mhm.
raising families together,
Mhm.
sharing kitchens together, sharing homes together.
Sharing all kinds of things,
Yeah,
infrastructure things.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that degree of interdependence that was going on was lost on me. And so
Mm.
I couldn't really um, absorb the value and the lessons that were going on to the degree they were going on because of the distance of my perspective. But I will say that I did pick up on enough that same thing that was similar to yours, which was my privilege of mobility is my hindrance if I
Yes.
keep using it to escape
Mhm.
hard things.
Mhm.
So I was able to recognize enough that those people who I didn't like how they were talking to each other and how intense the situation was that I didn't really want to be a part of in that way, that they were still living together. They were still having meetings together. They were still at potlucks together and they were
Mhm.
being amicable to each other in those settings. So even though there was
Mhm.
like intense strife going on, personal and principal, they still were practicing engaging and having an intimate life together,
Mhm.
just despite all that, or in spite of all that, or within all that. And I was at least awake enough in this, Saturn return times to say, y'all are my teachers in this way. And then I
Mhm.
committed for that similar reason of I throw myself into that experiment to stop this pattern of severance and abandoning and
Mhm.
following the path of convenience and ease, that was hindering depth and growth and all these other rewards that I couldn't even know were possible, or maybe I did and I longed for them, but I didn't know how to like touch into them. And so it was also that commitment to this, really intense, cumbersome situation, life way called community. Wow. Basically, I signed myself up for a lifelong PhD program in how to be a human with other humans in a place. And I'm still in kindergarten for this PhD program.
Right? Oh, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. You're so humble. Yeah, I just want to like uplift that. I want to like echo that again and honor that thing that you spoke to. Like I could just feel the emotion welling up in me at the beauty of that, of the like, yeah, the people embroiled in deep conflict and still showing up for each other, still committing to and living this life together with each other. And that's the thing that, yeah, I'm always trying to hold front and center, but like when you're so close to it and you're so in it sometimes, it's it seems challenging, but I think that is what a lot of people don't see about us in the way that it took you some time to see it, that people don't see about community, especially a really place-based community. Um, because we live in this world where relationships, connection is like it's almost disposable or it's almost transient. And when we're uncomfortable, we can move away from things. And it's like discomfort is like such a friend and such a gift. Um, and this idea of belonging, I think sometimes circles around like finding your like minded tribe or something like that. And I just like no. Yeah, that's what I'm like, no, not like-minded tribe. Like we share some values, right? That have all brought us here together, but we are not a like-minded tribe. And we all like so deeply belong here and have our role. And we can disagree and we can have conflict where our like-mindedness does not meet or overlap. And yet do still show up and care for each other in these really deep ways. And that like, oh, like, yeah, there's something, yeah, about that belonging in there. Like that is belonging, the active verb belonging, right? Like when we do that for one another and we persevere and weather conflict and learn from it and even we carry it with us, right? It's the cultural topsoil, as we like to say. Yeah, that makes it really rich.
Mhm.
Anyway, just really wanted to emphasize that because I'm still feeling teary-eyed about it. I've just run
Mhm.
out of words.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I want to pick up on that, and I just, to clarify that, yeah, Earthaven's not income sharing.
Mhm.
It's it's this mixture of public and private ownership, and so that creates a dynamicism that has its own,
Mhm.
uh, unintended, pressures of
Yeah.
that. When I mean what am I speaking to? I'm saying that we're coming with our baggage, we're coming with systems that are from where we come from, and some of that plays out, um, class and financial privilege,
Mhm.
imbalances. And then there's also this practice of collaboration and shared resource, paradigm and partnership
Mhm.
culture that's alongside all that. And so it's not an either or here. And so it's really even
Mhm.
more, dynamic than I imagine in that realm. Um,
Yeah.
we can
And
go
we're
there if
gonna
you want.
dive into that one, right? Like we're actually gonna unpack that in our fifth conversation, the last one, I think. The community
Cultivating the
mind,
community mind.
cultivating the
Yeah.
community
Yeah.
mind.
And it'll
That's
probably,
exciting. That'll
yeah.
be
Yeah. Yeah. This fitting in, it's like this word comes up. Like I kind of want to acknowledge that there's this spectrum of words that gets used that I don't think are all meaning the same thing, and yet there's crossover and there's also radically important differentiations. Not that I can unpack them all, but just to name, we're talking about belonging. Like, so we've brought up belonging. We've brought up the concept of acceptance. We've used the term fitting in. And there's so much curiosity and fascination I have with the interplay of those things. And where that particularly plays out is in our membership process.
Mm-hmm.
Woo. And I mean, there's infinite, examples to go into those, but just to like try to get in a little bit without going to the depths that we would like to go, but don't have in this. Yeah, I just want to like, for me, I'm holding it and I'm practicing holding this. It's not like I succeeded it all the time. And, I do hold that belief that everything in life is a practice. And that's kind of this empowering relationship I have to being where I am and striving to be someplace, but failing to be there and still being back here. And so it's just, I'm practicing. So in that practice realm, I believe that everyone inherently belongs. And there's times in which I or something or someone might not be a good fit for a relationship. Let's say a membership relationship, to become a member at Earthaven. For all kinds of reasons, it might not be a good fit. And we have a membership process that has an approval process. And so that kind of gets into that acceptance like place. Like, am I approved or not approved? Am I accepted or not accepted? And so just to like tease those apart feels important when we're trying to claim our power in belonging and yet be living in a contextual place with parameters, limitations, needs that don't always align. And just to give one example of this, and then I see you're excited to share. I have been in a situation in this village before where I'm living in a neighborhood amongst folks who someone's renting and they want to buy in, they want to become a member. And they're wonderful neighbors. They're great community members. In a tight neighborhood, I don't experience that it's always gelling, like really that cohesion and resonance and like match for the level of intimacy that neighbors have or co-housing units have. And so, I've been in a situation where we've shared with folks, this doesn't feel like a fit for this neighborhood for us. We love you. We adore you. You're great neighbors. And this, after years of attempting to deepen, we just don't seem to be like really gelling. And I kind of want to draw it as a parallel to intimate partnership that happens. It's like, when people shop around for a partner, it's like someone checks all the boxes, but I'm just not feeling it. That can happen. So I just want to acknowledge that that's a really tender, difficult, somewhat painful potentially position to be in. And it's asking those people in that dynamic and those relationships to have a pretty advanced, mature skill, a community skill, a relational skill, a human skill that is a huge ask. And that maybe we're developing together, or maybe it got developed before and we're just practicing it again, or maybe the skills aren't there and it is, a situation. So anyway, just to like name that it's tender. It like those nuances of difference between acceptance and fitting in and belonging. And the whole time in that relationship, I'm really wanting to communicate, you belong. It's not that you don't belong. Like I'm just not wanting to threaten that. And I don't know if that's even possible on some level. And Rachel, I'm kind of curious what you think of this, as you may know situations like this or have your own. that's like the
Oh, yeah. I mean, you just kind of opened or created a path for me to just walk right out on the ledge that I wanted to walk out on anyway. It's edgy territory, is why I put it that way. But there were a couple of things that you said that really resonated with me. And I guess the way, because I also live in a neighborhood. Well, let me take a step back and say, we are creating a culture from scraps here, right? Like, we are cultural orphans, and we are coming from a fragmented culture, all of us, no matter who we are, and and so that's a fractured sense of belonging, right there. We don't know our people. We don't feel our people. Our people are not living through us in this world. Um, but we're let me recollect what what was I wanting to say. um Coming as cultural orphans, we're building culture, from scraps. I was going to say scratch, but that's not quite correct, right? um and I know I feel protective of that. Like, there is a group liberation that is happening here, and we are in its infancy, right? Like you were saying, I'm a kindergartner, and I'm like, okay, now I resonate with that. Like, also a kindergartner of this, like, group personal liberation that we're experiencing. And skills, like you named skills, and that is an important part of it for me. But people don't have to show up with the skills, right? Some skills, yes, like we do need some community skills. We need to know how to talk to each other. Um, a few other essential things, but it's the willingness to be shaped as you shape, right? This, like, reciprocity. And you have to be willing to let the community work on you, work its magic, work its changes. And I think that's one of the biggest stumbling blocks I see with new folks, like in that vulnerable place, like in that fragile place of their wanting that sense of belonging, and also that sense of contribution and wanting to shape the world in which they live in. They become very focused on maybe how, and I have run into this. I have run into this stumbling block myself of how I want to change the thing here to be more the thing that I want. When really that happens, right? We all do that. It's a very empowered place where we all have the ability to affect change. But that is like a highway that goes both ways. And they're letting the community, like, polish your rough edges is a skill, right? That humility and that openness to change and feedback. Um, yeah. And so, like, I also live in a neighborhood where we have a little culture nested inside the Earthaven culture, right? Um, and I know it, like what you're speaking to. Like, I also feel that it's like, oh, you are a beautiful human, and this doesn't resonate. This doesn't, it's not, like you said, it's not gelling, it's not feeling quite right. um and it, like, this is a crazy position of power to be in. And I would, we've all, and that's the thing I think that we forget when we're new on the journey, is everyone who lives here has gone through this journey, right? And we have all started at the gate, as the vulnerable person, wanting to be accepted and to live here.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I mean, you said a piece that was I heard, and I don't know if others would have gotten this, but
Mhm.
um, it's a long there's a long-term relationship component
Well,
to
it's a
this.
marriage. That's how we refer to it, right?
Yeah, but even the courtship.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, I think this is maybe something that when people are interested in community and they're shopping around, that's one of their questions. What's your membership process? How long does it take? And And there is no fixed answer for that with Earthaven. There's those of us that are pushing for longer and having like locks on the gate, like a my main locks, like what do you call those, the canals, like different thresholds. Um, and there's those that need or want less of those, and have people come in sooner. And I think just that, and I'll just speak to like, there's an era or a culture or some trends or some perspectives and energies that exist now that aren't what Earth existed at Earthaven through and through. Like there's been chapters and phases of how
Mhm.
um, membership and residency has evolved and is still evolving. So we're in this place now. I don't know what it's going to be like in 5 years, 10 years, 20, 40, 50, 100, 2,000 years. So just to acknowledge this living organism that's in relationship with time. And I wanted to make one link that Tokopot does in this belonging book that she plays with. There's two clues that are really potent, that have been really potent and powerful for me in the word belonging. One of them is the word longing,
Mhm.
which even within that word, there's another clue of long.
Mhm.
So this, like, for me, there's a lot of sacred inquiry around just that piece. What is the relationship with my belonging to my longings that have to do
Mhm.
with long-term relationship?
Mhm.
And for me, that's been so liberating. And for the impatient, youthful, urgent one that wants it
Mhm.
all now, it's so uncomfortable otherwise. And so I just want to like just celebrate like this new way of relating to that, for me at least, that's acknowledging that the longings are these like conversations. For me, I'd call it mystery or spirit or creator, like it's calling me toward this, moving me in a direction that my soul connects with, that's not attainable in this
Mhm.
grabbable way, like my desire is met.
Mhm.
And so I just like, there's something that's like a pulling forth. So there's that. Whoa, my head is just connecting these things really fast. I'm stay focused. Another is be the longing,
Yeah.
be the longing. And so for me, I translate to that thing I long for most, practice it, give it away.
Mhm. Mm. Mm. Oh, that's good.
Like if I want to be included in a party, if I want to be invited to that celebration and event, like invite people to things.
Yeah.
If I want to be talked to, talk to someone,
Mhm.
practice that thing I long for.
Mhm, absolutely. It's like another it's a more beautiful version, I think, of that be the change you wanna see in the world. It's like we think all these things are different and disconnected, and, like, it's really just variations on a theme, and they're all pointing us to the same thing, but it's that long what you're saying is, like, sitting with something, anything, long enough to truly develop a relationship with it, and
Mhm.
we are so out of practice that if we sit with something for 5 minutes, we think we've developed a relationship with it, you know? I fall into that all the time. Or I learn 25% of something and feel like an expert all of a sudden or something like that. But yeah, that practicing, that give the it was the word you said that really touched me was give it away, you know? Like, yeah, if you want to see more love in the world, well then love people more. Like, be that's been a practice for me, the longing to be loved. I'm just gonna dive right into the belly of the beast here. And it's like I think a lot of people can tap into that. We do as humans have this deep longing to be like loved and cared for. And it's like, yeah, and what I have to do is not be afraid to love others and show that love. And that has been a practice for me to like let people know that I love them, to be affectionate with them, to care for them. That's it's in an explicit way, you know. I mean, it wasn't too long ago, I was like leaving your house and I heard love you come out of my mouth, you know, as I was leaving. And like I noticed it. I was like, oh, that came out very casually. And like there was a version of me not so long ago that wouldn't have been able to say that even if it was true, right? And how my loving you and showing you or anyone like my love for them, like what that does for me. And not that it, you know, and that sounds like it's like a selfish thing, like everything is about me. But like there are a lot of spiritual teachings in this world, some of the most ancient philosophies, and they're like, yeah, actually everything is about you. You know, that the altruism is both like true and not true. And I don't want to go on some like philosophical rant or anything. Um, but yeah, like when we give it away, it does come back to us tenfold, and we don't give it away for that reason. But yeah, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for offering
Mhm.
that like little gift. Yeah, and the longevity. I could say more about that as well.
Yeah, I I heard you say practice, like when the love you. It's like I also
Mhm.
just hear that there's a practice. There's a practice of vulnerability, and
Oh
um,
yeah.
yeah, and just to maybe ground some of this, what it might feel like or look like in this community, at least through my eyes, around connections with folks and feeling a sense of belonging amongst people.
Mhm.
Um, just to acknowledge that, to use some language that's borrowed from permaculture. In permaculture, it's talked about the zones of planting.
Mm.
And one of our community members here, Lee Warren, is just this is what something that came from her, as far as I know, that I just have felt is so brilliant, that she's transferred that into zones of intimacy.
Mhm.
And my zone zero, which is that place closest, is my inner world. It's my
Mhm.
relationship with myself and spirit. Maybe my zone one might include my nuclear family and maybe some really 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 close friends, and my zone two probably has, I don't know, 15, 20 people, and it's like also close people, but a little further out, more of them. Zone
Mhm.
three begins, for me at least, and each person will have their own descriptions and thresholds, but my zone three has, like, I don't know, lots of people, maybe most of the community in it. That's like my
Mhm.
friends, but acquaintances and just like friends who I see twice a year kind of
Mhm.
experience. And then four might be acquaintances that I know or fall in love with, but I never see again. And then strangers, zone five. It just goes however long, ancestors, like however we want to paint that picture. But the point is that I want to make is there's times in which very tender conversations come up, and very proposals are being worked on in council, or decisions are being made in neighborhoods that are like the issue at hand might touch into my zone zero and one, but
Ooh, yeah.
the people who have decision making power, are in my zone three, and we might be in each other's zone three or zone four because we just don't really, we're not each other's people. They're like an awesome or a distant uncle, like, and so just to feel like that's how I hold my experience here with these beloveds. And I call them all beloveds for me.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know some of them very well. Yes, of course, we share time together, and I know their names and I know some of their stories, but we are not reinforcing the thickness of those bonds on a regular basis. And yet we're highly impacting each other's lives through our decision making
Mhm.
process, of which it's shared. And so that's
Mhm.
a really interesting dynamic that most people don't experience out in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that touches on what you mentioned earlier, and that maybe we'll unpack deeply in the future of like these backgrounds that we're coming from, you know, and different levels of privilege. that we all carry and walk with in the world, and how tender and vulnerable that can be in that group decision making space. And I mean, just I think about the skills needed just to navigate that,
Mm.
honestly. Um, I mean, that's definitely something I've acquired since I've been here. And it is it is still hard sometimes. Um, um, for the and that's, cultivating the community mind and not always the personal mind, and like where in my even like my zones of intimacy, where do I meet the community, right? And I can see in some of us like various levels of comfort of like they're like meeting the community maybe in a close as a whole, in a closer zone than others, than I am or than someone else. Like someone else is holding the community at like a 2, and they're just that like open person, or maybe like a zone 3, I guess. And they're just navigating with such ease, and they tend to have like a pretty solid relationship with everyone. And then there's some of us that are like holding that group mind and that community, in a further out zone. And what this touches on for me is that question, like, I'm not sure if you're familiar with like the kind of attachment theory, or whatever, about secure attachment and then like anxious or avoidant attachment. And I've been sitting with this question like since I've learned about attachment theory, and this is going back to these primary relationships that we had with our caregivers as children. And it's like, what we belong in community. Like we've been siloed into nuclear families for so long, but we are creatures of community. And where a sense of self to some degree should have been shaped by community or a healthy sense of self. And so, like, what does this secure attachment to the group look like in us at this point in time? And like things come up to me, like, like we use like internal family systems and parts work and different things like that to normalize to some degree and work with our like fragmented selves, right? And like how are we engaging the community? Like how do we create secure attachment? How is there resilience? How is it that when we have a conflict with community, or we have a disruption in connection with the community as a whole, do we hold our center? And like, secure attachment is like holding that faith in that love with that person and that care with that other person. And this has been like an interesting question for me. Like I have my experiences with individuals, and I spread out my ideas around attachment not just to primary relationships or to parents. It's like every person in my life. I'm like, do I have an attachment based relationship? And that's really like, do I have a trust based relationship with them? And that's the zones of intimacy, right? It's a very similar thing. That would be like a zone 1 and 2, I think. um but yeah, it's just, and I'm just posing the question. I don't really have answers for this. Like, what does secure attachment to community look like, which would have like trust and resilience, and the ability to like weather the storm, I guess, and to engage in repair, and to trust that the other will engage in repair, I think maybe more so. um yeah, these are just things that I think about when I'm on my own. um and how do we develop that? Because, and I know I'm jumping around a little bit here, but I have been thinking a lot about my personal pathway through this belonging journey. And I think I kind of touched on it earlier, but I think of it like a pyramid, and at the foundation of my pyramid is connection to place, belonging to place, and caring for place, and my connection to the land, and farming, and whew, I'm crying. Um, and that first and foremost at that foundation is the like knowledge of myself as attending animal in the ecosystem, right? Which frees me from a lot of this cultural baggage and shame that we carry about humans being like a plague on the planet, and like the atrocities are happening. I'm not trying to not see them or avoid them or not do anything about them. And it doesn't free me so much as it helps me move through the grief of those things, to know the possibility is that I can be a gift to my environment. Um,
Mm.
and then, through that, after that comes people for me. And it's like through people at the top, like in relationships, self is at the top for me personally. That like these foundational, fractured, severed relationships that we humans have with place and culture, um, that the belonging to self can only come, self actualization can only come through like healing and traveling through those like grief filled layers. I'm curious about what, if you had a pyramid of belonging, like what yours looks like,
Mm.
or if
It's a
you even
great.
think about it that way.
I mean, yeah, I don't know if I think about it that way, but it was interesting that you drew a bridge that I was drawing in my mind, not necessarily a pyramid, but I was thinking of it as a living bridge between, because you were talking about secure attachment and and I was mostly imagining that with humans as like implicit in what you were
Mhm.
talking about, and then you jumped over to place, and so I was like, oh yeah, and that's what I was going to say though, and then you went into self, and so just to say that I think that that's what an experiment, a project, a life way, a situation like this provides, that is um, so intense to live with, but such a gift, which is this containment, this form for which
Mm,
we get to play within with all those relationships. We have a lot of beloved, community centered cousins who live over the mountains there in their single deeded lands, who struggle with a different set of issues of
mhm,
like, you know, who's the community?
mhm,
Because it's like, is it different zip codes, and is it people on the Google group? Is it people on that road? Is it people who, it's like, sure, there's all kinds of affinity groups that we have all over the world that create community. But back to this pressure cooker that is an intentional community, or a place-based village with this boundaried land. And so with that boundaried land, we can have a membership process that then creates a containment, not for inclusion or exclusion, but for the boundaries of an experiment.
for
And
the
again,
experiment, yeah.
yeah. And so just to say that that's this place of deepening in our relations for a long period of time that creates these intersecting like places of shared belonging, that like,
Mhm,
I feel my belonging with Rachel through soil, through the School of Integrated Living, because we get to share our life energy in this way that has this separate container, and then she gets to do that with other agricultural tenders, and they have their affinity place of relationship, of tending, and then theoretically we are all signing up for this thing greater than ourselves called this eco village experiment, that's like a bonding place. And so just to say, I want to, there is even though it's so much harder to live in such a condensed way with people, place, and time, and vision, there is a gift that I experience that I know when visitors come through like Experience Week, that they don't have that it's too amorphous. There's so much dilution, there's so much distraction, there's so much noise in their world because of that
mm,
lack of containment. And so
mhm,
that's why it is a gift to be in this pressure. I just keep calling it a pressure cooker, in the best sense of the word,
mhm,
a
yeah,
savory stew. um,
mhm,
and it kind of links to me for something that again, a linguistic geek out I did this past week, This actually came to me like I woke myself up in the middle of the night or something woke me up, and these two words came, and it was diversity and adversity. And I was like, huh, what's the relationship between those things? So I did the like search of word origin as one pathway to find what is the origin of those words, but also how is that playing out in my life in this community? Because I
Mm,
so to and what I made meaning around is Earthaven's mission is to be a living laboratory for an educational seed bank for a sustainable human future.
mm,
Embedded in that living laboratory concept and framework, for me, it translates is inherent and embedded experimentation and therefore diversity. And diversity, word origin, is to turn towards differences. Cool.
mhm,
Okay, that like was pretty not far of a stretch to get. And then I back to that my description of my life and reasoning here is to be in this lifelong PhD program of how to be human with other humans in a place. There's
mhm,
so much adversity, there's so much learning, there's so much fertile ground for personal growth and adaptation. And
mhm,
so, and I use that word adversity, but I was like, well, really, what does it mean? The first definition, it meant what I sensed it to mean. It said difficulties. And then what surprised me was the Latin origin means to turn towards.
oh,
And I was like, whoa, like
mhm,
that was powerful. For me, that really goes into the mythological realm of all these old stories that I hear. You know, one of them, Michael Meade tells of the Kalahari Bushmen, that they go out on the hunt, and when they go out on their hunt for their food, for their nourishment, they go out towards the roar of the lion, of the
mhm,
loudest lion. So they're running towards the roar, which
mhm,
one would think you're running towards your death. But what they know enough from that long relationship with that place and that ecosystem and way is it's the old male lion that doesn't have the strength and agility to move fast anymore. So that lion is not going to kill them. What that lion is doing with that roar is signaling to all the really able-bodied female and young to go circle around. And so if you run away from the roar, away from the thing you fear most, you're running towards your death because you're actually running towards that thing that has the ability to take you down.
mm,
And so that for me was this sense I have to my relationship to Earthaven is I'm leaning into these things that are hard and scary and
mhm.
so intense and often coming up against those wounds that I associate with a lot of pain. But I'm like back to like belonging myself to my pain, to my wounds, to my
Mhm,
lineage, to my longings,
mhm,
to this place I'm orienting towards,
mhm.
to a group of people who are committed enough to something greater than themselves that like I'm leaning in. And so that
Yeah.
was for me, that was that answer and connection to like
Mhm,
diversity and adversity.
mhm.
Thanks for hearing that long chunk.
Oh, yeah, no, I loved that I love that tale, that story. And yeah, the leaning in peace and, and it's another community skill to have tolerance for that. Um, yeah, because what am I feeling right now? I think I'm feeling, yeah, just the tenderness of this ride and this journey, and maybe the times that I have felt battered about a little bit by it. Um, and that you mentioned like that North Star in there of maybe it wasn't this time, but maybe in your last share of like the people pointed towards the third thing or like the shared values or what we're all working towards. And it makes yeah, the lean in, practicing leaning in makes the lean in easier eventually, right? That we do, maybe we've been told, we've been told that story. We've heard the story. We don't know it for sure yet that running towards the lion's roar is the thing to do. But it's like that this is the wisdom that's been passed down to us by our elders. Like, so we're, it's like going out on the hunt for the first time. I feel like we're all like that a little bit, like going out on the hunt for the first time. And like it's a rite of passage and requiring like bravery and courage. But it's also really vulnerable, and you're just like scared out of your wits sometimes, and you have to be okay with that.
I birthed the Remembering Retreat a few years ago, as a space to practice that as a pop-up weekend community. And it's really just a space where we practice. It's just getting into the depth of practicing these things. And I intentionally put a hyphen in the word remembering, because it's a reminder that we're remembering ourselves back to ourselves. And for now, I just want to turn it over to Rachel for this beautiful reading. That's this one we keep referencing, Toko.
Yeah, this is the opening blessing to Tokopah Turner's Belonging. For the rebels and the misfits, the black sheep and the outsiders. For the refugees, the orphans, the scapegoats, and the weirdos. For the uprooted, the abandoned, the shunned, and invisible ones. May you recognize with increasing vividness that you know what you know. May you give up your allegiance to self-doubt, meekness, and hesitation. May you be willing to be unlikable and in the process be utterly loved. May you be impervious to the wrongful projections of others, and may you deliver your disagreements with precision and grace. May you see, with the consummate clarity of nature moving through you, that your voice is not only necessary, but desperately needed to sing us out of this muddle. May you feel shored up, supported, entwined, and reassured as you offer yourself and your gifts to the world. May you know for certain that even as you stand by yourself, you are not alone.